You think you own this? The woman's voice cut through the autumn morning like a rusty saw blade, shrill and venomous. She was standing on my front lawn, my lawn, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at the cabin my grandfather built with his bare hands 70 years ago. This eyesore is coming down, Mitchell, one way or another. I don't care if I have to bulldoze it myself while you're sleeping. I was balanced on a ladder, cleaning leaves from the gutters, when Patricia Brennan's dusty Honda Civic had coughed to a stop across the street. 2 years in Cedar Junction Correctional for embezzling $120,000 from our HOA hadn't softened her edges. If anything, prison had sharpened them into weapons. The scar running from her wrist to her elbow, a souvenir from a prison kitchen altercation she'd later blame on me in a Facebook rant, caught the morning sunlight as she jabbed that finger repeatedly at my home. "This property is a blight," she shrieked, her voice climbing to a pitch that sent every bird within 50 yards fleeing for quieter trees. "A hazard! An insult to every decent, hard-working person in this community. And I am back, Mitchell Grant, and I am going to finish what I started." Behind her, on their matching front porches, my neighbors Dave Kowalski and Eleanor Chen stood frozen mid-conversation, coffee cups halfway to their lips, their faces painted with suburban dread. They'd seen this show before. They knew Act 2 was going to be worse than Act 1. I climbed down from my ladder slowly, deliberately, my work boots hitting each rung with a solid thunk. I was 59 years old, a retired industrial plumber who'd spent 35 years crawling through the guts of factories and office buildings across Massachusetts. I'd dealt with burst pipes, toxic leaks, and more than my share of angry foremen. I wasn't about to be intimidated by a woman who couldn't manage an HOA budget without stealing from it. "Patricia," I said, my voice level and calm, "you're trespassing, and according to the terms of your parole, you're not supposed to be within 500 feet of any HOA member. I'm an HOA member, so unless you want to go back to Cedar Junction, I suggest you get off my property." Her face went from red to purple. For a moment, I thought she might actually have a stroke right there on my lawn. Then she opened her mouth and screamed, not words, just a raw, primal shriek of fury that echoed off the houses and probably violated at least 3 noise ordinances. When she finally stopped to draw breath, I just looked at her calmly and said, "You done? 'Cause you're scaring the squirrels." That's when I knew this wasn't just round 2 of an old fight. This was war, and Patricia Brennan had just declared it on the wrong man's lawn. Let me take you back to where this all started. Back to when Patricia was queen of the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association, and my grandfather's cabin was just a peaceful place to drink morning coffee and watch the world wake up. My name is Mitchell Grant, and I'm what you'd call a townie. Born and raised in Wakefield, Massachusetts, a small city about 12 miles north of Boston. It's the kind of place where everybody knows everybody, where the local diner still serves meatloaf on Tuesdays, and where a new building is anything constructed after 1950. My grandfather, Samuel Grant, bought this piece of land in 1952 with money he'd saved from his factory job and his GI Bill benefits after coming home from the Pacific Theater. 3 acres on the edge of what was then farmland, now surrounded by suburban development. He built the cabin himself over 2 summers, every log notched and fitted by hand, every beam squared with hand tools, every stone in the fireplace placed with the kind of patience that's become extinct in our instant gratification world. I spent every summer of my childhood here, swimming in the creek that runs through the back of the property, learning to fish from Grandpa Sam, helping him split wood for the winter, listening to his stories about the war and about building things that last. He passed away in 1998, and he left me the cabin in his will. Not my father, not my older sister, me. Because he knew I understood what it meant, what it represented. I moved in permanently in 2010, right after my divorce. My ex-wife got the McMansion in the suburbs, and I got freedom and peace. I worked as an industrial plumber all over the Boston metro area, making good money, living simply, keeping the cabin exactly as Grandpa Sam had built it. Cedar logs, Stone fireplace, wraparound porch, hand-split shingle roof. It was rustic, sure, but it was solid. Inspectors called it a remarkable example of mid-century self-built residential construction. Patricia Brennan called it an eyesore. She'd moved into Meadowbrook Estates in 2015 into one of the new vinyl-sided cookie-cutter houses that had sprung up on the old Hendrick farm. Within 6 months, she'd somehow gotten herself elected HOA president. Within a year, she'd transformed the neighborhood from a quiet live and let live community into her personal fiefdom. It started small. Notices about lawn height grass couldn't exceed 3.5 inches. Notices about mailbox colors only black, white, or tasteful bronze. Notices about holiday decorations, no displays up more than 2 weeks before the holiday, all down within 48 hours after. Then came the fines. $50 for grass that was 3.75 inches. $100 for having your trash cans visible from the street on non-collection days. $200 for unapproved exterior paint colors, which apparently included the natural cedar log color of my cabin. My first violation notice came in March 2017. It informed me that my structure was not in compliance with community aesthetic standards and that I had 60 days to either reside it with approved materials or face escalating fines. The notice helpfully included a brochure from Brennan Brothers Siding Company, owned, I later discovered, by Patricia's ex-husband. I ignored it. The cabin had been here 40 years before the HOA existed. My property predated their incorporation. I had copies of the original deed, the grandfathered status from the town, everything. I was legally bulletproof. That's when Patricia got creative. Over the next 2 years, she generated a blizzard of violations. Insufficient driveway paving. My gravel drive was apparently unacceptable. Non-compliant fencing. The split rail fence Grandpa built was half an inch too high. Unauthorized structures. My tool shed, which had been there since 1965. Fire hazard vegetation, the lilac bushes my grandmother planted, and on and on and on. Each violation came with a fine. Each fine doubled, if not paid, within 30 days. By 2019, she claimed I owed the HOA $47,000. I laughed and threw the bills in the fireplace. That's when she made her fatal mistake. She pushed through an emergency beautification assessment, $5,000 per household, to pay for a grand entrance gate, a community fountain, and essential infrastructure improvements. The catch? The construction company she hired was one she secretly owned through a shell corporation. The fountain turned out to be a $400 bird bath from Home Depot. The grand gate was 2 wooden posts with a chain between them. She'd embezzled $120,000 from the HOA, and when Eleanor Chen's son-in-law, who happened to be a forensic accountant, started asking questions, the whole scheme unraveled like a cheap sweater. The trial was the biggest thing to happen in Wakefield since the high school football team made it to the state finals in 2003. Patricia's lawyer tried to argue she was just bad at bookkeeping. The prosecutor showed bank records of transfers to offshore accounts, receipts from luxury vacations charged to the HOA's credit card, and, my personal favorite, a $15,000 consulting fee she'd paid to herself for HOA optimization services. The judge gave her 2 years in Cedar Junction Correctional Facility and ordered her to pay full restitution. The HOA dissolved in shame. Most of the stolen money was never recovered. I thought that was the end of it. I thought wrong. The morning Patricia came back. That October morning in 2024, I'd been up since dawn. I'm an early riser, old plumber habit. You get used to 6 a.m. Emergency calls, and I like to have my coffee on the porch while the world is still quiet. It's the best time of day, when the mist is still hanging over the creek and the only sounds are birds and the occasional dog barking in the distance. I'd just started cleaning the gutters when her car pulled up. She got out slowly, like her body still hurt from whatever had happened to her inside, and she stood on the sidewalk staring at my cabin with such concentrated hatred that I actually stopped what I was doing to watch. She'd aged badly. Her hair, which had been perfectly coiffed blonde, was now streaked with gray and cut short in that institutional way. Her face was harder, more lined. The pantsuit she wore looked expensive but hung wrong on her frame, like she'd lost weight in prison and hadn't adjusted her wardrobe yet. But her eyes had that same zealot's gleam, that absolute certainty that she was right and everyone else was wrong. She saw me on the ladder and smiled. Not a friendly smile, the smile a cat gives a mouse before the pounce. "Mitchell," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Still living in that shack, I see." "Patricia," I replied, turning back to my gutters. "Still out of prison, I see. Congratulations on your parole." The sweetness evaporated instantly. This property should have been condemned years ago. It's a blight on the community. "Funny," I said, scooping a handful of soggy leaves from the gutter. "The town building inspector called it a significant example of period craftsmanship and suggested I apply for historical landmark status. But what does he know, right?" That's when she dropped the bomb. "Regulations are changing, Mitchell. The town council is discussing new emergency access requirements. There's talk of putting a fire lane through this property to service the new development going in behind you." I stopped what I was doing and looked at her. Really looked at her. There was no new development behind me, just woods, town conservation land. But the way she said it, with that smug confidence she wasn't making this up on the spot, she'd been planning this. "A fire lane," I said slowly. "Through my property. Through where your cabin currently sits. Yes," she said, pulling out a rolled-up document from her purse. "The fire chief is very concerned about emergency vehicle access. Tragic things can happen when fire trucks can't reach homes quickly enough. It was a threat, barely veiled. Comply, or there might be an accident. There are 2 paved roads within 100 feet of here," I pointed out. "The fire department has never had any access issues." "That's not your decision to make," she snapped. "I'm consulting with the new HOA board about this right now. We're going to do things properly this time. Legal. By the book." She couldn't be on the HOA board. Her parole conditions explicitly forbade it. But consulting? That was a gray area. She was already weaseling back into power. "You need to get off my property," I said. "Right now." She smiled again, that predatory smile. Then she took a deep breath and screamed a full-throated horror movie shriek that could be heard 3 blocks away. Dave Kowalski dropped his coffee mug. Eleanor Chen grabbed her phone. Other neighbors came to their windows and doors. When Patricia stopped screaming, gasping for breath, she pointed at me dramatically. "Did everyone hear that? Did you all hear how he threatened me? You're all witnesses!" I hadn't said a word except to tell her to leave, but she'd created a scene, manufactured a confrontation, given herself the opening line of her narrative. Violent hermit threatens innocent woman. I just stood on my ladder, holding a handful of wet leaves, and watched her storm back to her car. She'd fired the first shot, and I knew with absolute certainty that it was only the beginning. After Patricia's theatrical performance, things went quiet for about a week. Too quiet. It was the kind of quiet that makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, the kind of quiet that means something bad is brewing just out of sight. Dave came over the next afternoon with a 6-pack and a worried expression. We sat on my porch while he filled me in on the neighborhood gossip. "She's been talking to people," he said, glancing back at his house like Patricia might be watching. "Going door to door, very friendly, very concerned. Asking if people feel safe with your dilapidated structure so close by, mentioning fire hazards, talking about property values, creating a narrative." I said, "Exactly. And Mitchell," he hesitated, "some people are listening. Not everyone remembers what she did. Some of the new families, they just hear safety concerns and property values, and they start worrying. I wasn't surprised. Patricia was good at this. She knew how to plant seeds of fear and let other people's anxieties water them." "There's something else," Dave said. "I overheard her on the phone yesterday. She was talking to someone about permits and emergency ordinances. Mitchell," I think she's actually trying to get the town to force you out. That got my attention. The town won't touch me. My grandfather's cabin is legally bulletproof. Grandfathered status, pre-existing structure, the whole thing. Maybe, Dave said. But she's good at paperwork. She might find something. Or make something up. He was right. I'd been thinking of this as a neighbor dispute, but Patricia was playing a longer game. She wasn't just trying to harass me, she was trying to build a legal case to take my property. That night, I did something I should have done 2 years ago. I went to my filing cabinet and pulled out every document related to the cabin. Original deed from 1952. Building permits, such as they were back then, mostly just a handshake with the town clerk. Tax records going back decades. Letters from the Historical Society. The recent building inspector's report. Photographs of Grandpa Sam building the place. I organized everything into a binder. Then I made 3 copies, one for my lawyer, one for my safe deposit box, and one for a friend who lived 2 towns over. If Patricia was going to come after my home with paperwork, I was going to be ready. I also made a call to Tom Morrison, a property lawyer I'd used during my divorce. I gave him the full story, from Patricia's original harassment campaign to her return and her veiled threats about fire lanes. She can't touch you legally, Tom said after reviewing my documents. But here's the thing. Mitchell, she doesn't have to win in court. She just has to make your life miserable enough that you give up and sell. She can file complaints with the town, force you to attend hearings, make you defend yourself over and over again. It's death by 1,000 cuts. So what do? Document everything, he said. Every interaction, every threat, every violation of her parole conditions. Build a case that she's harassing you. Then we can get a restraining order. How long will that take? Months. Maybe a year, with appeals. A year of this. A year of Patricia chipping away at my peace, my home, my sanity. Start documenting now, Tom advised. And Mitchell, get security cameras. If she's really coming after you, you want proof of everything she does. I spent the next 3 days turning my property into a surveillance fortress. I drove to the big box electronics store in Burlington and bought a complete 4K security system, 6 cameras with night vision, motion detection, and cloud storage. The kid at the checkout tried to sell me professional installation. Son, I said, I've been installing complex piping systems in buildings since you were in diapers. I think I can handle mounting a few cameras. The look on his face made the whole trip worth it. I installed the cameras strategically, one on each corner of the cabin, giving me 360-degree coverage, one focused on my driveway and the road, one on the back where the creek runs through the property. Every angle covered, every approach monitored. I ran the cables myself, neat and professional, and connected everything to a monitor system in my office. As a final touch, I put up small, tasteful signs at the property line. 24-hour video surveillance. All activity recorded. Let Patricia try something now. I'd have it in glorious 4K. Eleanor Chen came over while I was mounting the last camera. She's a retired elementary school teacher, 73 years old, sweet as pie and sharp as a tack. Good thinking, Mitchell, she said, nodding approval at the cameras. That woman is up to something. She's been making calls all week. I can hear her yelling through her windows. She's planning something big. Let her plan, I said. I'm ready. But I wasn't. Not really. Because Patricia wasn't planning something big, she was planning something insane. The first strike came on a Tuesday night in late October. I was in my armchair reading a book about the history of Boston's subway system. I'm a riveting guy when the power went out. Not a flicker, not a brownout, just sudden, total darkness. The refrigerator stopped humming. The lights died. The little green light on the TV went black. My first thought was a blown transformer, but I could see lights on in Dave's house across the street and in Eleanor's house next door. It wasn't the grid, it was just me. I grabbed my mag like Grandpa Sam's old one, heavy enough to brain someone if it came to that, and went to check the breaker box on the side of the cabin. The box was mounted on the exterior wall, easily accessible, which now seemed like a design flaw. The metal door was hanging open. Someone had been here. The main breaker was flipped to the off position. My heart started hammering. This wasn't a prank. This was trespassing, property damage, and intimidation. Someone had walked right up to my house and cut my power. I flipped the breaker back on. The exterior floodlights blazed to life, and I quickly scanned the yard, the woods, the street. Nothing. Whoever did it was gone, but they'd left a calling card. Spray painted on the side of my cabin in big red letters were the words, "Fire hazard, condemned." I stood there in the glare of the floodlights looking at that graffiti and felt ice water run through my veins. This wasn't harassment anymore. This was sabotage. This was a preview of what Patricia was capable of. I immediately checked my security cameras. The one covering this side of the house had been spray painted black. Whoever did this knew about my cameras and had neutralized them first. I called the Wakefield Police Department. 2 officers showed up within 15 minutes, young guys, probably fresh out of the academy. They took photos of the graffiti, wrote up a report, dusted for prints on the breaker box, found none, and told me there wasn't much they could do. "Could be kids," one of them said. "Halloween's coming up. Lots of pranks this time of year." "Kids didn't cut my power and spray paint a fake condemnation notice," I said. "This was deliberate. You have any idea who might have done it?" I hesitated. I could tell them about Patricia, about her threats, about the whole history. But what proof did I have? She was smart enough not to do this herself. She'd hired someone or convinced someone to do her dirty work. No, I lied, but I want this documented. I want a paper trail. They promised to file the report and increase patrols in the area. Then they left, and I was alone with my vandalized home and my racing heart. I spent the rest of the night in my armchair, maglite in my lap, staring at the security monitor and waiting for the next shoe to drop. It dropped 2 days later. Thursday afternoon, I came home from a supply run to find an official-looking document taped to my front door. It was from something called the Middlesex County Building Safety Commission, and it informed me that my property had been flagged for emergency inspection due to multiple code violations and safety concerns. I was ordered to appear at a hearing the following Monday at 2 p.m. at the Wakefield Town Hall to show cause why the structure should not be condemned as a public hazard. My hands were shaking as I read it. This was it. Patricia had somehow manufactured an official proceeding to take my home. I called Tom Morrison immediately. "Send me a photo of that document," he said. I did, and he called me back 5 minutes later. "Mitchell, this is fake." "What?" "There's no such thing as the Middlesex County Building Safety Commission. Building inspections are handled at the town level, not the county level. This is a forgery." "But it looks so official. Anyone with a laser printer and some legal templates can make something that looks official," Tom said. "This is designed to scare you into showing up at a fake hearing, or maybe not showing up and then having them claim you defaulted. Either way, don't respond to this. It's a trap." Relief washed over me, followed immediately by anger. Patricia had crossed a line from harassment into actual fraud. Forging government documents was a felony. "Can we use this?" I asked. "Absolutely. But we need to prove she created it. That's going to be the hard part." I took the document down, sealed it in a plastic bag evidence, and added it to my growing file. But I also made a copy and did something Tom would have advised against. I drove to Patricia's house and taped it to her door with a note. "Forging government documents is a felony. You're already on parole. Do you really want to go back to Cedar Junction?" It was a direct challenge, a threat for a threat. I knew Tom would tell me I was being stupid, but I was done playing defense. I wanted Patricia to know I wasn't afraid. That night, sitting on my porch with a whiskey in the sunset, Dave came over looking pale. "Mitchell," he said, "I just got a call from the new HOA president. Patricia's been appointed as special security consultant for the neighborhood. She's pushing for a special assessment to pay for her services. She can't do that. Her parole." "She's not technically on the board," Dave interrupted. "She's a paid consultant, gray area, And she's telling people it's because of you. Because your property is a security risk. She's making you the villain, and she's getting paid for it. The whiskey turned sour in my mouth. She'd found an end run around her parole conditions. She was back in power, getting paid, and using that power to target me, all technically legal. "There's more," Dave said, and his voice dropped to almost a whisper. "She mentioned something about aerial surveys, about documenting hazards. Mitchell, I think she's planning to fly drones over your property." "Let her," I said, though my stomach was churning. "It's all recorded now." But as Dave left and the night closed in around my cabin, I felt the first real tendrils of fear. Patricia wasn't just harassing me anymore. She was building something, a network, a narrative, a legal framework. She was patient, and she was smart, and she had the weight of the HOA behind her again. For the first time since this started, I wondered if I could actually lose this fight. The drone came on a Saturday morning. I was in my workshop fixing a leaky faucet when I heard it, a high-pitched buzzing like an angry hornet. I went outside, and there it was, hovering about 40 feet above my roof. It wasn't some cheap toy. This was a professional unit, the kind that cost thousands of dollars, with a high-resolution camera and what looked like thermal imaging equipment. It made slow, methodical passes over my cabin, my outbuildings, my entire property. I grabbed my phone and started recording, making sure to capture the drone, my property, and the direction it was coming from Patricia's side of the neighborhood. The drone hovered for a moment over my propane tanks, the two big white cylinders that fuel my stove and water heater. Then something detached from the drone's undercarriage. A small object tumbled down, landing in the grass about 3 feet from the tanks. My blood ran cold. Was it an explosive? Was she actually trying to blow up my house? The drone zipped away, back toward Patricia's area. I kept filming until it disappeared, then cautiously approached the object it had dropped. It was a plastic bag. Inside were oily rags and a book of matches, a homemade fire starter kit, the kind of thing an arsonist might use. The plan clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Patricia had just planted evidence on my property. Evidence that I was planning to commit arson. She'd drop an anonymous tip to the fire department or police, they'd find the materials next to my propane tanks, and suddenly I'd be the dangerous one. The unstable hermit, who was a threat to the neighborhood. It was brilliant and terrifying, and absolutely Patricia, but she'd made one mistake. My cameras had caught the entire thing, the drone arriving, hovering, dropping the package, and leaving. I had proof. I didn't touch the bag with my bare hands. I went inside, got rubber gloves and barbecue tongs, carefully picked up the evidence, and sealed it in a larger plastic bag. Then I photographed everything, the bag, the exact location where it landed, the propane tanks in the background. I called Tom Morrison. "We're filing for a restraining order," he said immediately after I described what happened, "and we're notifying her parole officer. This is intimidation and attempted framing. She's violated her parole terms. How long will it take?" "For the restraining order, we can file emergency papers Monday morning. It'll go before a judge within 48 hours. Finally, I was taking the offensive. Finally, I was fighting back with something more than cameras and documentation. But Tom's next words brought me back to earth. "Mitchell, you need to prepare yourself. Even with all this evidence, it's going to come down to your word against hers. She'll claim someone else flew that drone. She'll say you planted the arson materials yourself to frame her. A restraining order might slow her down, but it won't stop her. And if she's willing to go this far..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. If Patricia was willing to frame me for arson, what else was she willing to do? That Sunday, I decided to take a proactive step. I needed allies. I needed witnesses. I needed the neighborhood to see what Patricia was really doing. I sent an email to everyone in the Meadowbrook Estates directory, about 40 families, inviting them to an informal gathering at my cabin that afternoon. "Burgers, hot dogs, and the truth about what's been happening," I wrote. "Come hear my side." 16 people showed up. More than I'd expected, less than I'd hoped for. But it was a start. I grilled burgers on my back porch while people toured the cabin, saw the graffiti I hadn't yet cleaned off, examined the security cameras, and looked at the printed evidence I'd compiled: photos, reports, the fake condemnation notice, stills from the drone footage. Dave spoke up first. Most of you know Patricia tried to bankrupt the old HOA and ended up in prison. What you might not know is that she's targeting Mitchell because he wouldn't bow to her before, and she can't stand that he's still here. Eleanor added her voice. I've known Mitchell for 15 years. He's been nothing but a good neighbor. His grandfather built this cabin with his own hands. It's part of our community's history. Patricia wants it gone because it doesn't fit her vision of what the neighborhood should look like, and because Mitchell won't be bullied. One of the newer residents, a woman named Kara who'd moved in last year, raised her hand. I don't mean to be rude, but is your cabin up to code? Are the concerns legitimate? Fair question, I said. I pulled out the building inspector's report from 6 months ago. The town inspector certified that the structure is sound, historically significant, and presents no safety hazards. This cabin was built better than most modern houses. It stood for 72 years through hurricanes, blizzards, and floods. It'll stand for 72 more. Then why is Patricia so determined? Someone asked. That was the question I'd been asking myself. What was I missing? I think it's personal for her, I said. Revenge for not bending to her will before, but there might be more. She mentioned a fire lane, access for new development. Dave heard her talking about big money. I don't have all the pieces yet, but my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Having fun with your little pity party? Enjoy it while you can. Your time is running out. I didn't react, didn't show the message to anyone. But my hands clenched around my phone. Patricia was watching. She knew about the gathering, and she was escalating. The barbecue ended with promises of support, with people agreeing to speak up if the HOA tried anything, with Dave and Eleanor forming an informal committee to protect historical properties. It felt good. It felt like progress. It was the last good feeling I'd have for a long time. Monday morning, I arrived at Tom Morrison's office at 8 a.m. sharp to file for the emergency restraining order. His secretary looked uncomfortable. Mr. Grant, she said, Tom asked me to tell you he can't represent you anymore. The floor seemed to tilt. What? Why? He can't say. Conflict of interest. He's very sorry, but he's referring you to another firm. She handed me a business card. I stood there, stunned. Tom had been enthusiastic about my case 2 days ago. What had changed? I called the new lawyer from my truck. The secretary who answered said the attorney was booked solid for the next 3 weeks, but they'd try to fit me in for a consultation. 3 weeks? Patricia could burn down my cabin and salt the earth in 3 weeks. I drove home in a fog of growing panic. Something had happened over the weekend. Patricia had done something, made some move that had scared off my lawyer. When I pulled into my driveway, there was a white van parked on the street. 2 men in what looked like official county vests were walking around my property, taking photos and making notes on clipboards. "Excuse me," I called out, approaching them. "What are you doing?" The bigger of the 2 men, a brick-shaped guy with a shaved head, barely looked at me. "County assessment. We're documenting code violations." "Let me see your credentials." He showed me a badge, Middlesex County Safety Compliance. It looked official, but after the fake commission notice, I wasn't taking any chances. "I'm going to verify this with the county," I said, pulling out my phone. "You do that," the man said with a smirk. "We'll be here for a while." I called the county building department. After being transferred 3 times, I finally got someone who could help. "Sir, we have no one conducting assessments in Wakefield today," the clerk said. "And those badges? They're not ours. Someone's impersonating county officials." "Then I need police here right now," I said. By the time the Wakefield PD arrived 10 minutes later, the men and their van were gone. The police took my report, but their expressions said what they wouldn't. I was becoming the neighborhood crank, the paranoid guy who kept calling about phantom harassment. "Mr. Grant," the officer said gently. "Have you considered that maybe you're under a lot of stress? That you might be seeing threats where there aren't any?" "My lawyer just dropped me," I said. "Fake county inspectors were on my property. A drone dropped arson materials on my lawn 3 days ago. This is all documented. This is all real." "We'll look into it," he said in that tone. "That means we'll file this and forget about it." After they left, I sat on my porch steps, head in my hands, trying to understand what was happening. Patricia was moving in multiple directions at once: legal pressure, fake officials, intimidation. She was overwhelming my ability to respond, and I was starting to crack. That night, Eleanor came over with bad news. "Mitchell, the HOA board met today. Emergency session. They voted to authorize a special infrastructure assessment study. Patricia is running it. They're paying her $15,000 as a consultant. And the study is focused on one thing: emergency vehicle access to the properties behind yours. There are no properties behind mine. It's conservation land." "Not anymore," Eleanor said, her face grave. "A developer just submitted plans to the town council. Luxury condominiums, 30 units, and they need a second access road to get approval. The fire lane. It was real, and if it went through, it would cut directly through where my cabin sat. They can't just take my property," I said. "They can if they claim eminent domain. Public safety trumps private property rights. Mitchell, I think Patricia's been planning this since before she went to prison. She's not just harassing you, she's stealing your land legally." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. All of this, the harassment, the intimidation, the fake notices, it was all softening me up for the main event. Patricia wasn't trying to make me miserable enough to sell. She was trying to destroy my credibility so that when she moved to take my land through eminent domain, I'd look like a crazy hermit standing in the way of progress and public safety. "There's one more thing," Eleanor said quietly. "The board voted to support the fire lane unanimously." "I'm sorry, Mitchell. Dave and I argued against it, but we're not on the board anymore. They're all new people, and Patricia's convinced them you're the problem." I sat there on my porch as the sun went down, watching the shadows lengthen across my grandfather's cabin, and for the first time since this all started, I felt hopeless. Truly, completely hopeless. Patricia had outmaneuvered me. She had the HOA, the board, a developer, and apparently enough pull to scare off my lawyer. She was building a legal framework to take my home, and I had no idea how to stop her. All my cameras, all my documentation, all my evidence of harassment, none of it mattered if she could convince a judge that public safety required taking my property. I'd lost. I just didn't know it yet. That was Monday. Tuesday would be worse. I woke up to find another notice on my door, this one from the actual Wakefield Building Department. A formal inspection was scheduled for Friday. Numerous complaints regarding structural safety have been filed. Inspection is mandatory. Failure to allow access will result in fines and possible condemnation procedures. This was real. Patricia had generated enough fake complaints that the real building department had to respond. I called the building department. I was inspected 6 months ago and passed with flying colors. What complaints? "I'm sorry, sir. I can't discuss specific complaints, but we've received 17 separate reports about your property in the past 2 weeks. We have to investigate." 17. Patricia had orchestrated a campaign, probably got her allies to file complaints, maybe created fake identities. It didn't matter. The result was the same. I was being forced to defend my home against a bureaucracy that just wanted the problem to go away. Wednesday, I received a certified letter from something called Meadowbrook Legal Services, LLC. It informed me that I was named in a civil suit brought by the HOA for creating a public nuisance, reducing property values, and obstructing community development. The suit sought $250,000 in damages and an injunction, forcing me to demolish my cabin. The law firm was real. The suit was real. And the lawyer's name at the bottom made my blood freeze. Thomas Morrison, my lawyer. The one who dropped me for conflict of interest. He'd switched sides. Patricia had gotten to him somehow with money, with threats, with whatever leverage she had. He knew my entire defense strategy, all my evidence, all my plans. I'd lost my lawyer and gained him as an enemy. Thursday morning, I was in my workshop trying to keep busy, trying not to think about how I was going to afford a legal defense against my former lawyer when I heard engines. Big engines. I went outside and saw them, 2 bulldozers being offloaded from a flatbed truck at the end of my street. Behind them was a dump truck and an excavator. Construction equipment, enough to level a building in an afternoon. A man in a hard hat approached my fence. "You Mitchell Grant?" "Yeah. We've been contracted to begin preliminary work on the emergency access road. Just wanted to give you a heads up. We'll be starting clearing operations Monday." Clearing operations? Trees, brush, existing structures in the right-of-way. It's all in the permits. What permits? There's been no eminent domain filing, no condemnation hearing. Above my pay grade, buddy. I just do what the paperwork says. He handed me a document. "You're supposed to get this 72 hours before we start? Consider yourself noticed." The document was from the Town of Wakefield Department of Public Works. It detailed the proposed fire lane, complete with a surveyor's map. The red line of the proposed road went directly through my cabin, through my living room, to be exact, and it was scheduled to start Monday, 4 days from now. I called every lawyer I could find. 10 firms. Not one would take my case. The word was out whoever represented me would be going against Tom Morrison, against the town, against a developer with deep pockets. It was career suicide. I called the town manager's office, the mayor's office, the town council. I left voicemails that were never returned. I called the newspaper, the TV stations, anyone who might care that a 72-year-old cabin built by a World War II veteran was about to be bulldozed to make way for luxury condos. No one cared. Thursday night, I sat on my porch with a bottle of whiskey and watched the shadows move across my grandfather's cabin. This was where he'd taught me to fish, where he'd told me stories about the war, where he'd shown me how to use a hammer, how to measure twice and cut once, how to build something that would last, and in 4 days, it would be rubble. I'd fought. I'd documented. I'd tried everything I could think of, and I'd lost. Patricia had won. She'd used the system against me, had found every leverage point, had played every card perfectly. The cabin would be destroyed, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I drained my whiskey, went inside, and started packing. If I couldn't save my home, at least I could save the things that mattered: my grandfather's tools, my grandmother's quilt, the photo albums, the deed, all the memories I could carry. I worked until 3 a.m., sorting through a lifetime of belongings, trying to decide what was worth saving and what would be buried under bulldozer tracks. At some point, I stopped packing and just sat on the floor, surrounded by boxes, crying for the first time since my grandfather died. I'd lost. Friday morning, I woke up on the floor of my living room, surrounded by half-packed boxes, with a pounding headache and a despair so deep it felt physical. The building inspector was coming today. In a few hours, someone from the town would walk through my cabin and likely find reasons to condemn it, not because it was unsafe, but because the fix was in. Patricia had won. The inspector would rubber stamp her narrative, and by Monday, the bulldozers would come. I made coffee, drank it on the porch, watched the sunrise one last time over my grandfather's land. And then, my phone rang. "Mr. Grant, this is Jessica Chen, Eleanor's granddaughter, the lawyer." I vaguely remembered Eleanor mentioning that one of her grandkids had gone to law school, but Eleanor had told me days ago that Jessica was in Seattle, working for a corporate firm too far away to help. "I'm in Boston," Jessica said. "I flew in last night. Grandmother told me everything. I've spent the past 48 hours reviewing your case, and Mr. Grant, I think I can help you. But we need to act fast. How much time do we have?" "The bulldozers come Monday," I said, my voice hollow. "Building inspectors here today at 2 p.m. I don't have money for a lawyer. I can barely..." I'm not doing this for money, Jessica interrupted. I'm doing this because Patricia Brennan embezzled $15,000 of my grandmother's retirement savings, and because no one should lose their family home to a con artist and a corrupt system. Now tell me, do you have everything documented? Every interaction, every threat, every piece of evidence? Yes, all of it. Hundreds of hours of video, photos, documents. It's all archived. Good. Send it all to me. Every file. Right now. I need to see everything before the inspector arrives. For the first time in days, I felt a spark of something other than despair. Hope, maybe, or just the relief of not being alone anymore. I sent Jessica every file, every video clip, every photo, my entire documented nightmare, compressed and uploaded to her server. She called back an hour later. Mr. Grant, this is good. This is really good. Patricia's made mistakes. Multiple felonies, actually forging government documents, criminal trespassing, witness intimidation, probably conspiracy. But here's the problem. Everything is moving so fast that we won't have time for a normal legal process. We need to stop this today. How? The building inspector. If we can prove to him that you've been targeted as part of a conspiracy, he might halt the process long enough for us to file injunctions. It's a long shot, but it's all we have. I need you to trust me. Can you do that? What choice do I have? Good answer. I'm coming to your place. Have all your original documents ready, the deed, the old building permits, everything. And Mr. Grant, don't pack any more boxes. We're not giving up your home without a fight. She hung up, and I stood there in my kitchen, phone in my hand, feeling something I hadn't felt in over a week. I felt ready to fight back, and the project was rejected. Turns out the conservation land behind your property is home to a breeding population of spotted salamanders, protected species. The land is now permanently classified as a wildlife preserve. No development, ever. Your view is safe, Mitchell. Forever. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The salamanders saved me. The salamanders and 70 years of one family refusing to give up. She smiled. You know what I learned from your case, Mitchell? The system is messy and imperfect, and sometimes it protects bullies instead of victims, but it also has cracks. It has rules. And if you know those rules better than the bullies do, if you're patient and thorough and you don't give up, you can win. Is that why you do what you do now? Someone has to stand up for the people who don't have a voice. Elderly folks being pushed out by developers, families losing their homes to corporate landlords. People like your grandfather who built something with their own hands and deserve to keep it. She stood up. Anyway, I have another case in Lexington. Widow fighting an HOA that wants to fine her for not repainting her house while she's on a fixed income. Go get 'em, I said. After she left, I sat on the porch until the sun was high overhead. I thought about Grandpa Sam, about Patricia Brennan, about the strange path that had led from his hammer to my cameras, from his logs to my legal documents. Grandpa built this cabin to be a home, a sanctuary, a place of peace. It had been all those things, but for a while it had also been a battlefield, and now it was something else, a symbol. A reminder that sometimes the right thing to do is simply to refuse to move. A rustling in the bushes caught my attention. Pete the raccoon emerged, looked at me with those bright banded eyes, and waddled over to the bird feeder. He knocked it with one paw, spilling seeds everywhere, then looked at me as if to say, I'm still here too. Yeah, buddy, I said. We're all still here. The cabin stood solid around me, 73 years of hand-notched logs and stone and memories. My grandfather's hands had shaped it. My defense had saved it. And now it would stand for another 70 years, protected by law and by the stubborn refusal of one man to be moved from the land his family had loved.